Hey there, beautiful people, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Bethel. If you are new here, thanks for coming to my channel. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button and you press that notification bell so that you do not miss any of my upcoming videos. And make sure to like this video. Let's get this video to 2,000 likes. So, I did a video a good couple of months ago called 10 things that I learned in my first year of marriage, and you guys absolutely loved that video. The amount of response that I got was incredible. I'm going to put the link for it in the description bar, so make sure you check that out, of course, after you've watched this one. So in light of that, off the back of that video, I thought, you know what, why don't I make this into a little series where I touch on various different topics, and I'm calling this series 10 Things. So, as you can see by the title of this video, we are talking all things love languages, specifically 10 things that I have learned from my experience with love languages. So, I'm assuming that the majority of people are very familiar with what love languages are, but for those of you who don't, love languages is essentially a concept that was created by a man called Gary Chapman, and it is the 5 ways in which we give and receive love. So, I'm going to read something from a bio that he wrote in the book. So, I have over 12 years of experience of counseling couples, and I ask myself the question, when someone sat in my office and said, I feel like my spouse doesn't love me, what did they want? Their answers fell into 5 categories. I later called them the 5 love languages. So obviously this isn't something that he's just sort of come out of the thin blue air. This has come from countless amounts of hours of counseling sessions, seminars, and him speaking to people. And he goes into detail about this in his book. So the 5 ways in which we give or receive love are words of affirmation, quality time, gifts, physical touch, and acts of service. So the book is a global bestseller, and he's written various different versions of this book. So the original is just the 5 love languages, and then he's got love languages for children, for teenagers, for singles, for men, etc. So I will leave all of the information in the description bar, so make sure you guys go and check out the book. So now that you've got a little bit of understanding about love languages and what it is, let's go into my 10 things about love languages. The first point is that it is important to know what your love language is. So for those of you who don't know what your love language is, you're probably thinking, how do I start? The first thing I would say is to read the book. Now, the reason why I say to read the book is because it gives you so much more insight into the specific different areas of love language. It kind of goes into detail as to what gifts really is. There's so much more to gifts than just you being a person that just loves materialistic things. It will go into acts of service, etc. And obviously, because he's got so much experience with counseling and, you know, speaking to different couples, he's included a lot of stories that he's sort of picked up over the years, which is actually really interesting to read, and it gives you great insight into the different types of love languages. The second thing to do is to go online and do the quiz. It is so simple, and it's actually quite enjoyable. So I will leave the link for it in the description bar, so make sure you guys go and check that out. Essentially, it will give you, I'd say, like multiple choice questions where you can choose between 2 points. So it might say, for your birthday, would you prefer a gift or would you prefer a holiday? Yes or no. Would you prefer for your partner to say that he loves you, or would you prefer for him to surprise you with a gift? Yes or no. And then depending on whatever answers that you answer, towards the end, right at the end, it will give you a list of the 5 love languages and your percentage. So essentially, there isn't any love language that you don't like per se, but you might score really low on some. Some people can score 0 on some, I believe. However, you will always have sort of like your top 1 or 2, and they will be your main love languages in terms of like the ways in which you receive love. The next thing that you can do is ask yourself 3 questions. So this is from the book. So number 1, first observe how you most often express love to others. So essentially, most times they say that your love language is what you give to other people. So if you are constantly giving people compliments. You are constantly sort of saying nice things to people. You're the kind of person that would write someone, you know, a really beautiful message in a birthday card, for example. Then words of affirmation might be your thing, because that's the way you tend to give it. Or if you are a person that, you know, really likes to spend time with other people, you love creating moments and going on holidays, etc., quality time might be yours. So that might be a good indicator. The second thing is, what do you complain about the most? So look at what you complain about to your spouse, for example, if you are in a relationship, or what do you complain about to your friends or to your parents or your siblings? Do you complain that you don't ever get gifts, or do you complain that they don't ever spend quality time with you, etc.? The thing that you're sort of complaining about the most, typically that's an indicator as to what your love language would be. And then the third thing, for those of you who are in a relationship, what do you request of your spouse the most? So if you're constantly sort of asking your spouse to give you a back rub, for example, or to rub your feet, or to give you a hand massage, then physical touch might be your thing. If you are constantly requesting that you go on date nights, for example, then quality time might be your thing. So those are sort of 3 things that you can do to figure out what your love language would be. But hands down, the quiz is the way to go. So make sure you guys do that, and let me know in the comments what your love language is as well. The second point is that it is important to know your spouse's love language. So let's use an analogy of colors. Let's say, for example, your partner's favorite color is red, but you haven't taken the time to figure out that that is his favorite color, or you don't know that. So every time you buy him something, it's yellow. You're not going to fully satisfy him. Even though the item might be really nice, it's not really touching that thing inside of him that really loves red things. So a lot of the times, or I've even found that in my relationship, in the times where I haven't communicated to my husband his love language, there's been this disconnect. It doesn't quite land. So as an example, my husband's love language is acts of service. So whenever I give him an act of service as opposed to a gift, the reaction is like night and day. So I could give my husband a really expensive gift. Let's say, for example, recently on his birthday, I bought him a computer. Now, it was something that he really wanted. It's something that he really needed. It was a useful gift, and he is very, very happy. And yes, of course, he was appreciative. However, there's just a different level of joy that he gets when I do something that is acts of service. Now, to me, sometimes, or at the beginning of my marriage, it would be really frustrating, because acts of service to me is not a difficult thing for me to do. To fix up his favorite meal is very easy. To give him a back massage is very easy. To give him a facial is very easy. It doesn't take much effort. But for him, because that is his love language, it's just like fireworks go off for him. So again, it's really, really important to know your partner's love language, because if not, you're going to be trying to meet their needs, and it's just not going to land, because it's not the way in which they want to receive it. So it is so paramount that you know and you take the time to figure out what is your partner's love language. I would highly recommend, if you are in a relationship, to do it together. So before me and my husband got married, we actually sat down, we both had our laptops, we both did the quiz, and then we showed each other our results. And what it does is, when you get your final results back, underneath each point, it will sort of expand on what that love language is, and it will give you like a little paragraph. So we ended up sort of having like a little date night where we just chit-chatted and spoke about each love language. We realized some things for ourselves that we didn't realize, and we were able to share that with one another. So I would highly recommend, if you are in a relationship, to just kind of make it an experience, because I really feel like it will help you guys out. You cannot blame your partner for not receiving love in the way in which you choose to give it. So I've spoken on this before in my 10 things video. So for those of you who know the story, you're just going to have to go along for the repeat. But when we first got married, our first Christmas, I was so excited, because I was like, cool, this is my first Christmas as a wife. I'm going to go all out. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. So I get my husband a present, and bear in mind, like, I'm really excited, especially for me personally. Occasions are like a big thing, and I grew up with it being a big thing as well. So I wrap up the present, I'm all here for it. I give it to him on Christmas morning, and it's just like, oh, thanks, babe. And I'm just like, can I get something else from you? And it was really frustrating. Then comes time for his birthday. Same thing happens, where I plan loads of different things, and all of the physical items that I give him, while he was appreciative of it, I wasn't getting the response that I wanted. Come to find out, later on in the evening, we come back home from like a lovely dinner and I offer to give him a manicure. And it was literally like, hail Queen Bethel. I mean, he was in love with your girl. And I literally was just like, I don't understand you. I just don't understand you. I've done X, I've done Y, I've done Z. None of it has impressed you, but a nail clipper and a file and me giving you a manicure is something that has just like made your whole day. And then he said something to me which was just like light bulb. And he said, babe, you know that acts of service is my thing. And it was just like, like, of course, like, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to give him gifts. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to plan nice things. But at the end of the day, I can't forsake the fact or blame him for the fact that that is his love language. And I can't change that about him. I can't automatically make him a person that really wants and loves gifts. Yes, you can still do it, but it just means that now, number one, I expect less from him when I do give him a gift or something that's physical, or I do show love in something that isn't his love language. But it also makes me sort of remember and keep in the forefront of my mind to always make sure that I'm showing love in that way. So if I'm planning sort of like a day for us, I'll make sure that somewhere in that day there is a form of love in the form of acts of service. So again, I think it's really, really important that, number one, you know what their love language is, so that you don't disappoint, but then you don't also blame them and force your partner to receive love in the way in which you choose to give it. It's important that once you know what their love language is, you actually give them what their love language is. So the next point is that love languages is not just for married couples or people that are in a relationship. The majority of the time, I found that when we talk about love languages, it's always within the context of marriage or relationships. However, as human beings, period, everyone desires to be loved. Think about how many people you are in a relationship with right now. You could be in a relationship with your partner, your actual relationship, and then you have relationships with your friends, with your family members, your mum, your dad, your siblings. I remember reading Love Languages for Singles way before I ever met my husband. And I remember literally finishing that book and being able to go through in my head and kind of figure out what I thought my friend's love languages was, or what I thought my mum's love language was, or what I thought my dad's love language was. And honestly, I think you'll find that once you kind of realize and pick up on what people's love languages are, it just changes the relationship that you have with them. Think about how differently you would approach your friend if you knew that your friend was really someone that loved quality time, that was her thing. You'd make more of an effort to sort of like plan a day where you can go shopping or meet up for a coffee at Starbucks. Or if you know that your best friend's words of affirmation is like her thing, then you would send her a text message, let her know that you're proud of her for what she's doing, or just kind of send her a nice message on a Monday morning to kind of get her week started. So I think it's important to think outside of the concept of just like love and romantic relationships, and think about platonic relationships as well, because at the end of the day, human beings, period, we all need and desire to be loved. So how amazing would it be if you were to understand people's love languages and then implement that in your relationships with them? The next point is your love language can change. So I read a blog post on this recently, and honestly, it was amazing. I'm going to try my best to find it and leave the link for in the description so that you guys can check it out. But essentially what the writer was saying is that based on where you are in life, based on your circumstances, your love language could change. So for example, if you are a single woman, then maybe words of affirmation is your thing. But then when you get married, gifts might then suddenly become your thing. And then when you have children, because obviously that takes a lot of work, then acts of service might mean more to you. So essentially it was talking about, as you know, time changes, it's important to redo the quiz and sort of reassess where you are, because as human beings, we're never the same. The person that I am today is not the person that I was 10 years ago, is not the person that I'm going to be 10 years from now. So I guess it's important to make sure that as we are evolving and growing, we're constantly relearning ourselves and re-getting to know ourselves and what our love language is, which I thought was a really interesting concept. The other thing, which is kind of linked to this, is I almost feel like If you've been deprived of a certain love language, then that can kind of shift in terms of the rank. So obviously I mentioned that when you get the results back from the test, it will give you all of the 5 love languages in rank from top to bottom. However, I feel like if one is sort of neglected and you've never received one, so let's say for example, in the context of relationships, just for this example, you've never received words of affirmation. It's never really been like a thing. After a while, I would feel like it would start to be a thing of you'd kind of miss it. So it would kind of go up in your rank of importance or what you need, not because it's something that necessarily you wanted to start off with, but because you haven't really experienced it, then you kind of long for it. So again, I think it's important to reassess sort of where you are in your life, and also to reassess whether you feel like you're receiving love in all of these 5 ways. The next point is sort of in the context of marriage and relationships, just because that is where I am in my life. So this point is, it is important and it is your responsibility to let your spouse or your partner know if you are not receiving your love language. So let's say, for example, over the period of a month, you haven't received your love language, or you don't feel like your partner has spoken to that part of you. So I'll use myself for an example. So my love language is words of affirmation. So if I don't feel like I'm receiving that from my husband, I've got 2 options. I can either be resentful and I can be around the house with an attitude and really moody and just sort of not happy, or I can take responsibility and I can let him know. So there will be times where I will go to my husband and share something with him, or I'll say something and he might give me a response that to me is a little bit flat. I'll sort of nudge him and be like, I need a bit more from you, like wink wink, like words of affirmation. And then he'll be like, okay, I'm really sorry, and then he'll give me a little bit more. Or if, for example, I feel like I haven't really heard him say something to me, I'll kind of in a jokingly way be like, oh, you haven't told me you love me today, or something, just because for me it means so much when I hear it. So I feel like it's really important to make sure that if you don't feel like you're receiving your love language, you actually let them know, because a lot of the times the person might not realize it. So for you, it's not really fair on the person, basically, is what I'm saying, if you hold resentment towards them and you don't actually let them know, because that's the only way in which they're going to change or do better, is if you actually bring that to their awareness. So I think it's really important that we take responsibility and we let them know. So for this next point, I want to talk about when you focus only on your top love language and you neglect the rest. So I'm sure that you will have seen on social media and things like this, when people talk about their love language, they always talk about the top one. My love language is X. My love language is this. My love language is this. But we forget that there are still all of these different love languages that would still mean something to us in one way or another. So I've mentioned previously that when you do the test and you get your results, it will rank your love languages from 1 to 5. Each one will have a percentage, so it is very, very rare that your bottom one will be 0. Most times it will still have a percentage, even if it is as small as sort of like 3 to 5%. So when I did the love languages originally, gifts ranked right at the bottom of mine, so I think it was like 3 or 4%. That doesn't necessarily mean that I don't want to receive gifts. It's just not my top thing. So right at the beginning of our relationship, I feel like whenever my husband would want to buy me a gift, I would always be like,
no, like you don't need to buy me that, or you don't need to get me anything.
Or he'll get me something and I'll be like,
no, like that's way too expensive, like you spent too much money.
And again, gifts wasn't like my number one thing. So it wasn't something that I put a lot of priority on, and it wasn't what I sort of demanded from my husband. Now, words of affirmation is my number one. So that's where my focus was, and I feel like he was very, very good at giving me that love language. Fast forward now into marriage, I started to it's been a while since I've received a little gift, and I felt like I started to miss it. And again, I think it's because I kind of just neglected it, because I was just like, you know what, it's not my love language, it's not my number one, so I'm not going to require this of my partner. So then after a while, I realized that no, actually, even though that scored bottom, it didn't score 0. It still had a percentage next to it. So I said to my husband, it's been a little wow, since you bought me something, like a just because gift, not because it's my birthday or because it's Christmas, but just because you thought of me and you wanted to buy me a bunch of flowers, or just because you saw something and you thought it might look nice on me. So it wasn't necessarily the materialistic side of gifts that I wanted, it was the sentiment behind it. And most times with people who have gifts as their number one, it isn't actually a love for materialistic things. Most times it's the sentiment behind it. It's the fact that the person thought enough of you to buy you something or to express love to you in that form. So I remember kind of having to sit down and being like, yeah, I'd appreciate a little gift here and there. And so again, I think it kind of just reminded me how important it is to not neglect the fact that you would still appreciate love in all of those different ways. Just because a specific one is your number one doesn't mean that you don't want to receive love in any of those other ways. And I feel like if you don't, after a while, you'll start to miss it and you'll kind of start to feel like you're being deprived. Within the context of relationships, it's not good enough for just one of you guys to be invested into the concept of love languages. It's going to take two of you guys to take the time to sit down, to understand love languages, to understand what each of the different love languages are, to understand what each other's love language is and what your own love language is. At the end of the day, it takes two to tango. So with anything, whether it's love languages, whether it's communication, whether it's the art of apology, it doesn't make sense if only one of you is doing all of the personal development in this area and the other person is just oblivious as to what this is. So imagine you've read the book, you know what your love language is, and your partner has no idea about the concept, no idea what words of affirmation and quality time is in terms of like where it ranks or what your love language is. It's just not going to work. So within the context of relationships, I really think it's something that you need to do together if you're going to make it work, and if it's something that you actually want to see play out in your relationship. You are the product of the love which you have inherently been taught or seen growing up. So I really feel like the way in which you received love growing up, the way in which you were taught love growing up, the way in which you saw love growing up is going to impact how you react to love, how you give love when you're older, and what your love language will be. So for me, for example, growing up, I grew up around a lot of words of affirmation. So my family members, my parents were constantly giving me words of affirmation growing up. So I was used to it. It's not something that makes me uncomfortable or anything, and inherently it means that it's something that I almost demand or I need, and makes me feel good because it's something that I'm used to receiving it. So when I don't receive it, it's like, hey, why did no one tell me I did a good job? And it's not a vanity or anything like that, but I'm used to that, and so it touches me in a different kind of way. Now my husband, on the other hand, I've noticed that when I kind of go overboard with words of affirmation, or let's say he's done something and I'm so proud of him, if I go like on and on, he'll start to become like a little bit shy, or I can see that he's becoming like a little bit uncomfortable. So I've kind of realized that the way in which you've grown up, or the experiences that you've had, has like a really huge impact on sort of how you will be towards love languages growing up, or how you'll be towards love in general. Another example could be like physical touch. Like in your family growing up, were you guys really like lovey-dovey? Were you a family that like really hugged or like kissed and things like that? Like I feel like that makes a difference. So I know people who were really not on the like hugging. It's just like a hey, like that's it. And sometimes it makes me wonder, is that because that's something that they weren't really taught growing up? And there's no right or wrong way, but at the end of the day, we're all different. Every family is different. Every experience growing up is going to be different. So I do think that is interesting. Just kind of think amongst yourselves, what has love sort of been like for you growing up, and see whether that has had any impact on how you are at the moment in your present life. And I figure out that you'll find it will actually have made a difference. So to wrap up the 10 things that I have learned from love languages, my final point is that ultimately Jesus is my love language. So I do not shy away from expressing my faith. I am a firm believer in Jesus Christ, and I really feel like as a Christian, or as people in general, we put a lot of emphasis on how we expect love from other people, how we want our friends to love us, how we want our parents to love us, how we want our spouse to love us. At the end of the day, love languages, the concept is about how we want to receive love. So it is really about ourselves. But one thing that I've really found, that if you are not fulfilled first with the love of Christ, no love from any human being is ever going to be able to fill that void. If I do not first build a relationship with Jesus Christ, if I do not first completely just indulge myself with the love that he has for me, the love that my husband gives me, as much as it is cool, it's not going to fill that void. Because I'm loved by Christ and because I accept his love, my husband's love is the cherry on top, and it just makes everything so much better. So I think it's so important, and I just admonish you guys to just first find Christ before you find love from a friend, from a partner, from a materialistic thing, from a holiday, from quality time, from words of affirmation. Find it from Christ first, because that will be the foundation for which everything else will then go on top. So that's it for this video, 10 things that I have learned from love languages. I really hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'm looking forward to creating so much more content as part of this 10 things series. So please make sure that you hit that like button if you enjoyed this video and if you want more content like this, and make sure to leave me a comment in the description box. Tell me what your favorite point was. Let me know what your love language is if you go and do the test. Again, I will leave as much information as I can in the description bar so that you guys can go and do your research. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, press that bell so that you do not miss another notification. Until the next video, bye.